Today I will review and test a calculator for knitting a pair of perfect fit socks. You can find the links in the description below. First we need to take the measurements. I will use the doll so you can see better. First we need to measure the distance from the bottom of the knee to the floor. Next we will need to measure the calf circumference. Then measure the circumference just above the ankle. Next measure the circumference just behind the toes. You also need to measure the foot length from the heel to the toe. The last thing to measure is the ankle height. I have used the metric system, so I need to enter Y in the first box. If you are using the imperial system, you have to type N. Now I'm entering the measurements the same way as we took them from the dough. The pink cells are mandatory and the green ones are optional. The next group of pink cells contains the gauge information. In the last pink cell you have to input the hem size or the width of the elastic you want to use. Now I will go back and fill in the green cells. The information in them may help you if you are going to knit these socks again in the future. The stretch factor cell is optional. You can type a positive number to make the socks looser and a negative number to make them tighter. Now I have filled up everything and I can go to the second tab and print the instructions. I'm using OpenOffice because the calculator works best with it. It's free to use software. Select your printer and click on Print. This is the instruction sheet. First I will show you how to knit the sock starting with the rip. Make sure the racking handle is in its lowest position. According to the instructions, I need to raise 33 needles on each bed. To arrange the needles for 2x1 rip, start from left to right on the front bed and put every third needle out of working position. Now raise one needle to the left on the back bed, skip one needle and continue raising needles in groups of 2. Both end working needles must be on the back bed. Now we have to make a tubular cast on. Set the machine to knit. For the first row I will use stitch size 2. If you are using Passap, insert the orange strippers and take the main yarn. I'm using 2 strands of acrylic yarn. Rack the back bed by rotating the racking handle and knit one row. Now set the machine to knit tubular and increase the stitch size. Rack the back bed to its starting position and knit 2 rows. Set the machine to knit again, increase the stitch size and knit 1 row to finish the cast on. Clear the row counter and set the stitch size for knitting the rip. According to the instructions I have to knit 10 rows, but I will knit 1 more so the lock is on the left side of the machine. Increase the stitch size on the front lock for the main knitting, then set the back lock to free pass. On Passap you have to change the strippers. Now you have to transfer all stitches to the needles on the front bed. Transfer the leftmost stitch to the leftmost needle, then transfer both stitches of each group to the empty needles on the front bed. You will have 2 stitches in the hooks of the empty needles. Do you know that I have made a video about a similar calculator for knitting tights? I will leave a link if you want to check it out. Place the edge springs on the end needles if you are using Passap, then make sure all empty needles on the back bed are out of working position. I will drop the front bed and attach some weights to the knitting. Now knit 1 row. Set the machine for tubular knitting and set the row counter to 20 rows or as given in the instruction sheet. The stitch size on both locks must be set for the main knitting. Now drop the front bed and remove the weights. You need to transfer half of the stitches to the back bed. This way you will have to sew only the rib in the end. I had to cast on over 33 stitches, so I can't divide 33 in half. That's why I will transfer 17 stitches to the back bed and then I will add one additional stitch on the front bed. You may put a weight on the stitches to keep them in place. Also, you can support my channel by liking the video, subscribing or leaving me a comment. Don't forget to put the racking handle in its highest position. Now put another weight on the stitches on the back side. I will place the edge springs on the last working needles. Now move the edge spring on the front bed and transfer a purl bump so you have the same number of stitches on both beds. Knit until you reach the row count given in the instructions. I need to knit until row count 42. Now you have to decrease 1 stitch on each bed. Make the decreases on the left side if you want to make the left sock and on the right side to make the right sock. Then continue knitting until you reach the next row count given in the instructions. In my case it's row count 64. Now you have to make decreases the same way on the same side as the first time. I don't have more decrease to make, so I need to knit tubular to row count 79. I will knit 1 additional row so the lock is on the right side of the machine. Now set the front lock to partial knitting and the back lock to free pass. I have to decrease 5 stitches on each side on the front bed. If you want to avoid holes while knitting the heels, you have to wind the yarn around the needles. I have a video about that, so you can watch it explained in detail by clicking on the info card in the upper right corner. At some point you may need to attach weight in the center of the front bed. On my machine I will raise pushers until I get only one in resting position on the right. I will be happy if you send me photos of your knitted projects on my email or my Facebook page. I will set the machine for tubular knitting again. Now I have to continue knitting until the next row count, which in my case is 116. At this point we have to make the toe decreases. At each end on each bed take the 2 end stitches and move them 1 needle in. Then put the empty needles out of working position. Now knit to the next row count. You have to make the decreases the same way. First you have to make decreases on each 4th row, then you have to make decreases on each 2nd row. You will find the row counts in the instruction sheet. I need to have 3 stitches on each bed in the end, so I'm making the last decreases now. I cut some of the footage to save you a bit of time. The process of making the decreases is the same. Now knit the last 2 rows. Now take the yarn from the lock and cut it. Thread it in the double-eye bodkin 2 and sew off the stitches. I will sew them off in a circular manner, but you may sew them by zigzag or you can drop the sock on waste yarn and sew the toe later. Don't forget to remove the weights before sewing off all stitches. Now I will show you how to knit the hem-style socks. First, make sure the racking handle is in its highest position. Raise 17 needles on the front bed and 17 needles on the back bed of the machine. As you can see, for the second style sock you need to start by following the instructions in the second box. The needles must be opposite to each other. Arrange the needles on both beds in 1-to-1 division. On Passap you need to move the edge springs on the last working needles. Now set the machine for tubular knitting and the stitch size to the lowest possible. On Passap insert the black strippers and take the main yarn. I will use the same type of yarn. Now knit 2 rows. Increase the stitch size on both sides of the lock. Now raise the rest of the needles on both beds. According to the instructions, I must have 17 needles on the front and 17 needles on the back bed. Make sure the needles are opposite to each other and tap on them to tighten the yarn. Now knit 2 rows to finish the cast on. It should look like this. Clear the row counter, set the stitch size for the main knitting and knit to the row count given in the instructions. Tap on the needles to tighten the yarn when knitting the first few rows. In my case, I need to knit 20 rows. Don't forget to support me by liking the video. Now we have 20 rows on the counter and our hem is ready. You can drop the front bed and rehang the stitches now to sew up the hem or use a lifeline to mark the row and sew the hem later. I will sew it later, so I will insert a lifeline. I will attach weights on each side of the knitting. Now you have to continue knitting tubular following the instructions written in box 3. You have to repeat the same steps as for knitting the other style of sock. This is the first sock I knitted. You will only need to sew the rib and hide the yarn tail from the toe. That is the second style. You need to hide the yarn tail from the toe and sew the hem. If you insert an elastic band, make sure not to make it too tight. Now I will show you the final result. That's the first sock. And this is the second one. After you sew the hem, you have to pull one of the ends of the lifeline to remove it. Now you can see what they look like on the doll. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day and see you in my next video.